just wanted to welcome everybody to our, what would have been our ninth annual, or I guess ninth annual retreat and gathering. And the background behind, I'll turn my background off at some point because I know it's annoying. But this was the picnic tables and the courtyard space where I'm imagining we would have probably met this morning. I drove by Chadron State Park this morning, and it's about 78 degrees here, so it would have been a beautiful morning to meet outside probably, but we could also move inside because we'll have the meeting facilities. And we think we'll be able to use the same facilities if we can gather face-to-face next year. So fingers crossed. I'll talk more about that at the end of today's session. But we're glad to offer this virtual workshop, and we've all been saying about how, lemonade from lemons, and it seems like it will give everybody an opportunity to attend this year from home, story catcher at home, and maybe give some people an opportunity to catch the story catcher spirit, so to speak, that maybe they couldn't do it otherwise. But so we'll get started. I'm going to hand it over to Steve in just a minute, but some ground rules here first. I promised in the email note to everybody that I would go over some of the ground rules that we thought might make the workshop the most efficient, most productive, least chaotic, but we like chaos, so who knows. So as I mentioned in the email note, let's try and make sure our mics are muted when we're not speaking. And if you're not that familiar with the Zoom controls, you might want to choose the speaker view because that will allow it to highlight the person who's speaking. Like right now, I should be highlighted if you're in speaker view. But with 20 plus people, right now we're up to 22, it can get a little bit chaotic. So we had talked on Thursday about maybe having everybody raise their hands if they wanted to talk. I believe you should have control over your mutes. But I think, I don't know, the more I've been thinking about this, we want to make sure that people feel free to talk and join the discussion. So maybe the thing we can start out with once Steve and Dinty get going, we can just try it out. Let's just see if naturally people are able to contribute by going unmute and contributing, and then maybe announcing yourself every time you come on, because there's 20 plus people and it might be hard for us to track. So you could just say like, hey, this is Matt. I have a response to that. Excellent question, Steve. And if that gets too chaotic, what we'll then do is we'll start having everybody raise their hands. And the way that you raise your hands is you go to the participants, you click participants at the bottom of your screen there, and you should see yourself. And then there's a raise hand function that you should see. Otherwise, you have chat, and you can always chat like we were practicing on Thursday. Call on me, call on me. I will be off to the side trying to monitor chat and other things. So if you have any issues at all, just put it in the chat and I'll keep track of it. And then if I need to let Steve or Dinty or Allison later know that somebody's itching to contribute something, I'll let them know. But I think that's the best way to sort of do that. And if we do have too much crosstalk or whatever, we'll figure out some ways to monitor it. I know Steve and Dinty and all of us who've been doing Zoom for a while, I think we've gotten fairly savvy at helping with the students join the usually the issue is getting people to contribute, so we don't want to sort of impede that at all. So yeah, I'll be monitoring from the side. Any questions at all, just put it in chat. And if you also feel more comfortable just chatting, like you don't want to go on mic or whatever, I can relay your question if it's not being read by the leader of the session or whatever. So I think we should be able to cover, and hopefully a natural rhythm will develop. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, and I'm gonna go and admit a few more people into the meeting and double check the chat and do all that sort of stuff. And then I have to give you the host controls too. So take it away, Steve.
Thanks, Matt. Someone just, you can all hear me right now? Can you wave if you can hear me? Am I coming through? Fantastic. All right. This is strange and fun and uncomfortable. So I just want to begin. I got Dinty will be beginning at 9:30, and I'm supposed to do a little bit of a welcome. So I'm going to first thank the folks who organized this. And I do have like a little, do you all see your reactions where you can give like claps like that. Can you all practice your reactions, your claps? Is that there for all of you? Let me see. There's a thumbs up. Does anyone else have it, or is it just? Oh, all right. Mary, I see. Okay, so I want us all, if you can find your reactions, to give a little hand clap for Matt for putting this together. We really appreciate Matt. He has a couple people assisting him. Marcus Jones, myself, another colleague of ours, Jonathan Rovner, is here, but we're not sure if he's actually doing anything. But Matt really takes the lead on putting this together, and this is really a year-round organizational kind of project. So we really need to thank Matt for taking the lead. Marcus and myself have certainly helped out a little bit, but emphasize little when we say that. I think we also need to thank the Mari Sandoz High Plain Heritage Society. All of our funding this year and the last couple years of the primary amount comes from the Mari Sandoz High Plains Heritage Society. So if you could do me a little favor and give them a little clap or a thumbs up on your screens, or that'd be really nice for them too. They made the conference not only possible, what we're doing today, but they also are the ones that provide a lot of the direction and a lot of the vision of what it is that we're going to do, and how it is that Chadron State College is really, our creative writing program has just grown so much over the last 5 years. And that's really through, you know, supporting the institution, but also huge support from Mari Sandoz High Plains Heritage Society. They've only said yes to us, you know, and putting together our various projects. So we definitely need to say thank you to them. I am now going to try something that's going to be, we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to go down. This is Matt's idea. We'll see how it goes. If it doesn't work, you do what I always do whenever I'm in a meeting with Matt. I just blame him. But I'm going to go down and call on everyone here, and you'll unmute yourself and just tell us where you're zooming from, the town, the city. You don't have to get too specific with your address or anything, but you let us know where you're at. And I'm going through my participants list, so it's not in alphabetical order. So I'll just say your first name, and if I have your last name, I'll do the first initial. And you can unclick your mute, say hello, where you're from, and we'll go through that, and then we'll do a little bit of an activity, and then I'll hand it off to Dinty. So, Abigail S., you can unmute and say hello. Are you out there?
Hello, I'm Abigail Swanson. Right now, I am at a summer camp near Long Pine, Nebraska, which is north central Nebraska. Yeah, so if I have unstable internet connection, it's because I'm at camp.
All right, Abigail. It is good to see you. I don't know, Allison Hagee, are you out there? Or if you're not, that's fine too, because we'll be working with you later.
Good morning, everybody. I'm here, Steve. Hi. I'm just staying off screen because I have a little canine helper this morning. But I'm zooming in from Laramie, Wyoming.
Thank you. It's looking forward to your stuff later today. Ashley B., you out there?
All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ashley Blacksheep. I am from the Black Hills of South Dakota, but I currently reside on the mountains of Colorado.
It's good to see you, Ashley. Brad M. Brad, how you doing, buddy? You out there?
Yeah, hi. Hello.
How you doing?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing all right. We're all graduate student friends. He did Storycatcher last year for us, actually, and he's back again. Go ahead, Brad. Say where you're from.
I am at University of Nebraska Kearney.
Well, thanks so much. We're excited to have you. Dr. Brad Wilburn, you out there?
Here I am. I'm zooming in from Sacramento, California.
All right, Brad, that hair is just looking better every time I see you there. All right. Brenda L., you out there?
I'm here. I'm where we're supposed to be, the Pine Ridge of Nebraska.
It's good to see you, Brenda. Carla, are you out there?
I am. Which Carla did you want?
It says Carla Guest. We've got two Carlas here, apparently. Both Carlas can say hello if you want.
Go ahead, Carla with a C.
All right. So this is Carla McCullough, and I am calling from just south of downtown Lincoln and really not far from where Mari once lived.
Oh, neato. All right.
Cool. I'm Carla Powell, and I'm in Chadron, Nebraska. We're very close to where we were supposed to be.
Diane, hello. You out there? Are there two Dianes? We have a Diane P and a Diane Well, I see Diane P. Do we have 2 Dianes? Really? All right. Diane P and a Diane G. Well, if either of you want to say hello, that would be great. Okay, well, we'll just move on. Alila, you out there?
Hi, I'm in Scottsbluff, Nebraska.
Good to see you. Jessica C.
I'm Jessica. I'm up in Anchorage, Alaska, and originally from Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think I attended a story catcher back in about 2013 or so.
Fantastic. Well, welcome, Anchorage. All right. And this is the sunny time of year in Anchorage? Yes? Right? Okay.
Well, the sun's still coming up here, but yes.
Okay, love to hear it. All right. Joanne F.
Hi, I'm Joanne Ferguson Kavanaugh. I'm in Papillion today, but I grew up kind of south of Long Pine there. So in the Nebraska Sandhills, south of Brewster, Nebraska.
Fantastic. Welcome. Katie S.
So I am from Gillette, Wyoming.
Fantastic. Welcome. Lillian J.
I'm in Chadron, Nebraska.
Well, it's very good to see you. We're excited to have you. Luann, am I saying that right? Am I saying that right? Yeah. That's all right. Some folks are just probably trying to figure. Oh, okay, there we are.
Okay, there I am. Hi, everyone. I'm
Hello.
from Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm using my iPad because I couldn't get my laptop to work, which is why I'm not, like you guys are. I'm using. So anyway, okay, goodbye.
We're excited to have you. Mary Kay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I'm in northwestern Colorado, just north of Steamboat Springs.
Fantastic. Meg S.
Hi, everybody. I happen to be Mary's sister. I don't know if she's claiming me today. And I'm from Greeley, Colorado. This is my 3rd story catcher. And I just want to say hi to some real familiar faces. And Ashley and Brenda and Lillian, and I know some of you were here last year too, but it was like, oh, there's some people I know.
Nancy, you want to say hello?
Yeah, actually, my name is Steve Flater, and
Okay.
I'm in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm having really a lot of trouble hearing people. I've checked my sound, and if you can increase the volume, I'd sure appreciate it.
All righty, I'll see what I can do here. Matt, can we increase the volume? All right. Sarah B., are you out there?
Hi, I'm sitting here in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I'm with Luann. And you might want to use headphones or earpods to help your hear better. That's what I had to do with my computer.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. All of our people who know technology a lot more than I do. Ginny G., are you out there?
I'm here. I'm in Scottsbluff.
All right. Well, welcome. Glad to have you here today. Is there anyone I missed that would like to just kind of poke in right now and say hello?
Hello.
Okay, that's Diane P.
Yes. Sorry.
All right. We got a little technical feedback there, Matt. Okay, good. So, Diane, did you say hello?
Yes, I'm saying hello.
Okay.
There's 2 of us here. We've got 2 units going.
Okay.
So I think we got a
you.
little
At the same
feedback.
time, it's the crosstalk. Okay. Well, we got you. Hello.
Okay, hello.
Yeah, one person mute and the other person talking. You also have to put your computer, one of your computers should be on mute too. Okay, everyone.
I'd like to say hello.
Oh, it's Dinty Moore. Hello, Dinty. How you doing, sir?
I'm fine. I'm in Ohio. It's 11:16 here. And just to make life more exciting, I'm trying to sell my house, and there are people touring my house, even as we speak.
Currently, all right. Well, good for you, Dinty. We just bought a house yesterday, so a lot of housing going on. Yes, Matt, we bought a townhouse, not a real house, but whatever. So I hope that goes well for you, Dinty. We'll be turning it over to you in about 13 minutes, depending how everything goes. But so I agreed with Matt when he asked me to kind of kick things off. He said we've got a lot of prose going on today, but that we haven't really done any poetry lined up for today. So he asked me if I would maybe set something up and do something that at least touched upon the idea of poetry, or at least the genre of poetry before we move on to our other prose genres. So I did want to begin today just by kind of reading a poem and kind of beginning the Story Catcher retreat this year by going over a poem. Before I talk or read the poem, I kind of wanted to kind of give a little bit of an introduction to the poem. This is not one of my poems. Thank goodness, a lot of people are thinking. This is not one of my poems, but it's by one of my favorite poets, and I'll read it in a minute, but I kind of wanted to talk or give a little introduction to kind of what I've been thinking about this poem a lot. And I think a lot of us, since about maybe the beginning of March, have been turning to the different kinds of arts to kind of make sense of maybe what's going on in our culture, in our society, in our world today. There seems to be not only a pandemic, but it just seems like, let's see, I'm 41 and I'm trying to think of a time in my lifetime where things felt so kind of chaotic or maybe divisive, or where you try to make sense. And I know I've been reading a lot. I'm sure some of you have tried to find the literature with a pandemic going on, right? So I don't know, I went back and reread The Plague, right? So that was my fun literature to try to make sense of what's going on. And it was quite profound, actually. And then, of course, you know, you go to your art and you try to find some sort of sense through your art and your different kind of literature. Even watching, I've been trying to check out different kind of, obviously, poetry, different movies, different TV shows, just kind of listening to music, just trying to kind of go to my art places to try and somehow fill that sense of confusion that I think I've been kind of experiencing. And of course, things like this, you know, we were in the middle of our semester, as a lot of you were, and all of a sudden we sent our students on spring break and they never came back. We never saw them again. At least through Zoom was the only way we kind of filled that in. And then after that, you know, we've been doing Zoom meetings and all these kind of things where you feel like you're not quite connecting with people the way that you used to. And I know a lot of us are feeling kind of maybe tired and worn down. And then Matt and I and Marcus had to talk about, you know, should we keep Story Catcher going? And at the end of the day, we decided obviously that we couldn't do, well, Chadron State Park told us we couldn't meet there. And then the state of Nebraska told us that meetings of this size might not be great. So we decided to do a virtual one-day event. And we weren't really sure if anyone would sign up or not, and how it would go. And of course, I think within 2 days of opening up registration for Story Catcher, we had 20 people signed up. And that speaks volumes, I think, not just to the power of Story Catcher, but to the need that we all might be feeling of connecting through the arts, through literature, through our different kind of ways, you know, literature, art in general. That's how we connect to our humanity, to the human condition, what it means to be alive. And I think we turn to these things at those moments in our lives that might be most confusing or most challenging. And it's really kind of heartening for me to see that sense of community outreaching and finding different ways we do it. So since on a personal level, since Story Catcher, since we were told we couldn't come into our offices anymore and to stay away, since I started working at home, there's been a lot of time in my house. My wife and I both worked at home. We have a little baby, and, you know, we'd play kind of hot potato with the baby. And that was great. And I would spend a lot of my time here in Chadron, Nebraska, to let my wife work, because our baby tends to be a little loud sometimes. I'd take her out of the house and we just go for these very, very, very long walks. And at the other end of where I live on town, there's a baseball field. And every day after her rest, me and my little daughter, I take her and put her in the stroller and we walk out to the baseball park. it just became part of the routine. And as I was walking, I'd be listening on my phone to different podcasts, different poetry readings, things like that. And every day I'd walk way out. It'd be about 2-mile walk out, 2-mile walk back. And right before I got to the baseball park, there was this house that I'd pass. And there'd be these 2 men sitting at their driveway, at the top of their driveway every day. Imagine, I don't want to insult anyone. I'd imagine they're in their 70s, maybe, okay. And I'd pass them every day. And at first, we just kind of stare at each other as we'd pass, right? And then after a couple of weeks went by, we'd start waving, And then, because we were all social distancing, those 2 gentlemen, myself, it just became a routine where every day we would just give ourselves a big wave and we'd say hello as we passed. And it became something that was kind of affirming. You'd look forward to it, right? And they'd wave to my little baby and give her a big smile. And I was always thinking as we go, I don't know these 2 gentlemen. I don't know what their worldviews are. I don't know what their political views are. I don't know, where they fall in terms of social positions on different debates within our culture. But I do know that every day when we passed each other, or when I passed and walked by, it was a great heartening moment. And I was thinking how during this pandemic, one of the big things I'm noticing is, though I'm keeping, if you could see our room right now, we're all 6 feet, we should probably wear masks, too bad. 6 feet apart. So it's this idea of like contact and human connection, and how do we bridge the gap of human connection during these times. I've never waved so much as I have the last 4 months to people. Like cars waving by. I know that's the Nebraska thing, like the little thing, the cool thing. That's a Nebraska thing, but like I'm getting more waves than ever. Like I'll pass shops. Maybe it's because I just walk around town all the time, but I wave to people. And it's really one of the ways of how we connect with people when it maybe feels like that we can't. So that's a long discussion or a long setup of this poem by the poet Tracy K. Smith. She has this poem that kind of speaks to, I think, what I've been feeling, which is how do we connect over these large distances? Not just during a pandemic, but during this kind of place where I feel like culturally and socially we're all divided. So I'm going to share my screen, I think, if Matt has allowed me that potential. I'm going to put up a poem by Tracy K. Smith here, if I can. Hold on. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. Hold on. There it is. Okay, I'm going to share this screen if it allows me. Share. All right, so you can all see that, right? You can all see that political poem there by Tracy K. Smith. Tracy K. Smith, I'm not jealous or anything. She's only about a year or 2 older than me. She's already been Poet Laureate of the United States of America. I sold in my last book 12 copies, but I'm not jealous. She's one of my favorites. She's just fantastic. And she has this poem called Political Poem. Obviously, when she wrote it, I think she was really thinking about the political divides within that culture. But I think this poem also speaks quite astutely to what it means to social distance. Before I read the poem, I should actually not put it on the screen yet because you're probably all reading ahead of me. But I'll say one more thing. I was listening to a podcast with an epidemiologist the other day, and he says, everyone calls it social distancing. We shouldn't call it social distancing. We should call it physical distancing. So we want to keep our space. But if ever there was a time for us to rely on social connection, this is the time. We just need to keep our space as we do it. So I love the idea, and I'm trying not to call it social distancing. I'm trying to say physical distancing. So I'll read this poem again, be thinking about how it might speak to these current times. Certainly, it also kind of speaks to life in rural America. Political poem. If those mowers were each to stop at the whim, say, of a greedy thought, and then the one off to the left were to let his arm float up, stirring the air with that wide, slow, underwater gesture, meaning, hello, and you there, aimed at the one more than a mile away to the right. And if he in his work were to pause, catching that call by sheer wish, and send back his own slow one-arm dance, meaning yes, and here, as if threaded to a single long nerve, before remembering his tool and sharing another message into the earth, letting who can say how long graze past until another thought, or just the need to know might make him stop and look up again at the other, raising his arm as if to say something like, still? And oh, and then to catch the flicker of joy, rise up along those other legs and flare into another bright yes that sways a moment in the darkening air. Their work would carry them into the better part of evening, each mowing ahead and doubling back, then looking up to catch sight of his echo, sought and held in that instant of common understanding, the God and speed of it coming out only after both have turned back to face to the sea of yet and slow, if they could. And if what glimmered like a fish were to dart back and forth across the wide wordless distance, the day, though gone, would never know the ache of being done. If they thought to or would, or even half wanted, their work, the humming human engines pushed across the grass, and the grass, blade after blade ascending, would take forever. But I love how long it would last. Very powerful poem, I think. And I know it's just about that time where we need to turn it on over to Dinty. Matt, you got one more thing to add? Okay.
Thanks for that, Steve. That was, turn your volume down. Okay, so just a couple of announcements. We had Casey join us. I think she was our last participant. So Casey, are you on the line there? She might be trying to be incognito.
Yeah, no, I'm here. Hi.
Hi, Casey. Where are you Zooming from?
Hello. I'm just at the ranch. I'm at home. I just got back from Cowboy Christmas, so we did a big run over the 4th pro rodeoing, and so.
Cool. All right, great. And Steve, I've been trying to work on your audio issues. When we have a break, if you want, we can try and stay on the line and work on it. The other option you might want to use, Steve, or anybody else who's having trouble hearing, is on the bottom of your screen, you should see a more ... button, and you can open closed captioning. I don't know how great it is. Is it one of those automatic things where it's kind of, but you can try that. And if you're having trouble with your video connection, or if you're having trouble with your connections with the audio, sometimes if you turn off your video, and it'll just bring up your profile picture, your name, that can help with that a little bit. But okay, so far we seem to be doing okay. And I'm going to have Steve now introduce Dinty.
Okay, I'm back. You're like, no, not him again. Don't worry, Dinty's coming. You all got Dinty's bio, so I'm not going to go over all of his literary achievements. He's a writer of real worth within this country. He's highly esteemed. For a while there, he was the president of what they call the AWP, or Association of Writers and Writing Programs of America, a pretty prestigious position for someone to hold. Dinty is also the editor of Brevity, which is an online literary journal of Flash Nonfiction, which I think we'll be doing some Flash-Pandemicing stuff today, so we'll be working with Dinty. But I'll just kind of start off. Dinty, I know Dinty when I was getting my PhD at Ohio University. Dinty Moore was one of the professors that taught in a very impressive program, and I got over my 5-6 years of studying at Ohio University, a lot of opportunities to interact with Dinty. And I think the thing that I really wanted to share about him, less as a writer, which I think you already know about, but more as a person. Dinty was really the heart and soul of that creative writing program. He was the director. He was the person making sure that everything ran smoothly. So he organized readings, or he certainly worked with all different students. But I remember every semester, or every semester, different graduate students were given the opportunity to do a reading. And I remember my turn came along and I gave a reading, and Dinty couldn't make it. And I remember the next day I got an email from Dinty just saying, you know, I couldn't make it, but I think that, you know, I hope your reading went well. It was those little details of Dinty, of just a good person, you know, who would always reach out and want to support students. I was a poet. I wasn't even in his genre of writing, but Dinty always made sure to support all of the students in his writing program that came and worked with him. I also remember Dinty's greatest piece of advice. I don't know if he thinks it is his greatest piece of advice, but it's the one that stands out for me as a writer still to this day, which was, if you're going to be a writer, you know, one of the things you might want to think about is what kind of person you are as a writer. Meaning, you know, if an editor has two pieces that they love in front of them, if they can only publish one, if the editor has some sort of connection with one of those people, who do you think they're going to publish? If the editor knows that person or has had positive interactions with that person, it's probably more likely that you can find your work getting published. So it's that idea of not just being a good writer, but being a good member of your community, being a good member of the literary world. So I would say Dinty was a great member, not only at Ohio University of our literary world, but he's been a great steward of American literature and being a part. He's an editor, he contributes with his own literature, and is a man who says yes. You know, we've asked Dinty to do Storycatcher. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it the last couple of years because of conflicts in schedule. Every time I ask him, it's an immediate yes. He's someone who really cares about giving back to the world of literature. And I think that those are the type of people, not only that we can learn a lot from, but I also think they're the type of people that we want to bring into our community. So we're so lucky to have Dinty today joining us for Storycatcher. And I'll just turn it over to him. And Dinty, we're really excited to be spending the next few hours with you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. This is kind of new to me as well. I guess we're all in this new Zoom world, but I'm looking forward to it. If I was going to be sitting here for 2 hours, I would want to know what I was going to be sitting through so I could figure out whether to put a cardboard figure of myself in front of the camera and wander off somewhere. My plan is for the next half hour or so to mainly talk at you, present the material I want to present, though there may be room for a little discussion depending on how the time goes. In a very short amount of time, I'm going to do that thing that Steve did where we share the screen, where I share my screen, and you'll see a PowerPoint that I put together. At around noon, at around 10, noon my time, 10 your time, I'm still translating the time change. At around 10 o'clock your time, we're going to talk about the two essays that were sent to you as a word attachment, the one by Lee Martin and the one by Kate Nurenberger, and try to, I'd like to hear your thoughts on them and also try to connect some of the material that I'm about to present about how flash essays work to those two essays. At around 10:30, this is all around 10:30 your time, we're going to take a break. 5 minutes, maybe 7 minutes, depending on how far away your coffee pot, bathroom, dog, whatever you need to do. But since it's a 2-hour stretch we have right here, I have built in a little bit of a short break in about halfway through. When we come back, we'll have a little more discussion, and I'm going to offer you a series of writing prompts that my plan is to get you to be writing. Well, it's up to you. You paid your money, you're here, but I really hope you do this. My plan is that you will write a flash piece during the longer break. There's a roughly 2-hour break for lunch. Eat fast, and that leaves you an hour and 45 minutes to work on a piece of writing that I will give you some subject matter ideas, some form ideas, some ideas about where spiritually, emotionally, whatever to write from. And then we all come back here, and then we're done here at 11:30 your time. That's the lunch break. Matt, jump in here if I'm telling lies. And then we all come back at well, 3:30 my time. I think that's 1:30 your time. You have the schedule. When we all come back after the lunch break, I will be asking as many of you, and I hope that's 20, as many of you as who are willing to share the rough draft of what you wrote during the break. I'll be giving you a word limit or a page limit to make sure we can fit everybody who wants to share their work in. I'll talk much more about that as we get to that moment. But that's what the next 2 hours are going to look like. And then there's the lunch break where I hope you're going to be doing a lot of writing. And then that's what the afternoon session is going to look like before I believe you're turned over to Allison. So I will wait a second before I dive in to see if there's any immediate questions from anybody out there. Good. I am now, this is going to be, as you noticed with Steve, this will take a minute, but I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to move to slide share mode. And I would like, I can see Diane Powelski. Can you, if you would wave your hand and let me know if you can see that screen. Okay, and I'll trust that everybody can. What we're doing today is called Flash-Demic, the art of flash nonfiction and the heart story. It's really a lesson on and a discussion of something called flash nonfiction. Very, very brief, true stories. We threw the Flash-Demic in there, the Demic. I think that was Steve Coughlin's idea. I'll just put that out there if anybody doesn't like it. What is Flash? So some people, when I talk about, and I've edited a magazine, Brevity, that has been publishing these short Flash pieces. So a lot of magazines publish them. It's not just Brevity. I've been doing this for more than 20 years. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, a 700-word piece. I'll just take an excerpt out of something longer. It doesn't usually work that way. Maybe once in a while, I've accepted something that I found out was a short bit of something longer, which is fine, it worked. But almost all the time it doesn't work because Flash is different. Flash needs to be intentional. There's certain things a writer has to be thinking when he or she says, I've only got 700 words here. And there's an urgency to having to fit the story into that frame that also translates. So a very short piece of nonfiction is not just a matter of cutting and pasting. It's a challenge in and of itself. I like to use a metaphor. So imagine that you're at the edge of a forest and there's a fire burning. And this is easier for you guys where you live. I'm living out in the east, well, not quite the East Coast. But anyway, I know you guys have a lot of forest where you live. Imagine you're at the edge of the forest. Deep inside that forest, there's a fire burning. In an essay of conventional length, and by the way, this is true of a short story if you're a fiction writer, or for that matter, a very long versus a very short poem, though poetry does work differently than prose. But in any case, a story. In a story of conventional length, the reader begins at the forest's edge, is taken on a hike by the writer, who is the tour guide for the day, perhaps a meandering stroll into those woods in search of that fire. There's a fire in there somewhere. We're going to eventually find it. The further in the reader goes, with each page that turns, the more the reader begins to sense smoke in the air, or maybe heat, or maybe just an awareness that something ahead is smoldering. But Flash is different. I don't know if you've ever had occasion to see these brave smoke jumpers who put out forest fires. In a Flash essay, the reader is not a hiker standing at the edge of the forest with all the time in the world to wander slowly and meander towards this source of heat. But the reader is a smoke jumper, and the reader is dropped 30 yards from where the forest fire is burning. The writer has to start the reader right at that spot, as close to the edge of the fire or as close as somebody can get without actually getting burned, right at the beginning of the piece. There is no time to walk in. That's what Flash is. Now, I talk a lot about heat here and urgency. I just want to say briefly that though the heat comes in the first sentence, I don't necessarily mean incendiary subject matter. I don't mean, you know, a car chase, a bar brawl, a screaming, shouting last argument before a divorce. A flash piece can often be very quiet, but the heat, in fact, the two we talked about, we were going to talk about today by Lee Martin and Kate Nirenberger, you'll note, are very quiet. The heat might come from language, it might come from image, it might come from the voice of the writer, from some sense of suspense, by the writer's willingness to look deeply at a difficult subject, but there'll be some sort of urgency at the very beginning, and that translates through each sentence, hopefully starting with the first. And that's what flash is. If you have a question, save it, because I have just a few more words to say about this now. Scene, the building block of all prose, I think, though show not tell. Sometimes you have to tell. There is that connective tissue that we use to make a story coherent. But there is a tendency sometimes when I tell people, or whoever tells people, or when a writer thinks I'm going to write a really short piece of fiction, or I'm going to write a very short piece of nonfiction, there's a tendency to sort of explain what you would have written if you'd had more words. And I understand that tendency, and it's seldom successful on the page. The building block, even as much as in a novel or a book-length memoir or in a conventional length memoir or essay, the building block of flash prose, flash nonfiction is what we're working on today, is scene. So what is scene? And I know most of you know this, but I have to remind myself when I write my lousy first drafts. So I think it's worth reminding ourselves. A scene is the opposite of a still photograph or a mere summary of what occurred. Neither of those is a scene, and neither of those is dynamic or nearly as exciting as a scene could be. In a scene, there is specific detail, sensory information, character movement, dialogue. It happens in time. It takes place over a few seconds or a few minutes. It's in nonfiction, it's when real people in an actual geographical location take concrete actions. So some people take a step further. They describe their childhood backyard. There was a sliding board over by the fence and a stack of firewood by the garage. Okay, that's much more, there's some sensory detail there, but it's still not a scene. What we need you to do is to show a particular Tuesday afternoon when you and your little sister were playing with a G.I. Joe and a Barbie in the dirt patch of the backyard, worn away by the swing set. And we need to hear the dialogue, we need to smell the air, we need to be there and feel the moment when the skies open and the rain begins to pour. That's a scene. And I'm going to be asking you, when we get to the prompts later today, to think about scene, remember scene. We're going to look at how Lee Martin and Kate Nirenberger use scene. So here's a scene, and it's brilliant because I wrote it just this morning. Unfortunately, you're muted, so I can't hear the wild laughter that comes with my stupid little jokes, but Brad will text me. It was late July. My little sister Josie and I were playing with a G.I. Joe and a Barbie doll in the dirt patch, worn away by our swing set. Let's make them kiss, Josie said. And we were about to do that when we heard a crack of thunder that seemed very close. Josie jumped up, her eyes blinking hard, and started for the house just as the fat raindrops began to plop all around us, kicking up the dry, dusty ground. Grab Barbie, she shouted, now running for the back door. She hates when her hair gets wet. That's a scene, maybe a minute long. I mean, in the real time between the character in that scene and her little sister, the amount of time they're standing there talking about the Barbie and the G.I. Joe, and the rain comes and the little sister Josie jumps up. You know, there's about that might be 30 seconds of actually action there. But that's a scene because it's happening in time. Those 30 seconds come out in a concentric, in a sequence, excuse me. I just lost my words. which is why I love to be a writer, because I can revise and come up with the right words in my second and third draft. And you know, and we can see the raindrops push the dust up from the dirt underneath the swing set. All of that is real. Third concept. I have three concepts I'm going to present before we take a breath and I ask you guys for any thoughts and discussion. The heart story. The other thing, there are two things that go into good. There are three things that go into good. There are 12 things that go into good writing. I'm going to work on 3 of them right now. The first one is craft. You know, making good sentences, making action move. You know, having scenes. All of those things that go into writing sentences that become paragraphs, that become pages, that make the reader feel that they are right there. And that's what draws us to a book or a story or a memoir. It makes us not want to put it down. The craft that sort of magnetically pulls us to the page. The other thing that makes writing is simply hard work. The writer being willing to write a first draft, say, well, some of that was good and some of that's not quite there, so I'm going to write a second draft. And then come back 2 days later and say, well, it's a little bit better, but there's still a lot of slow material at the beginning. I'm going to come back. So, you know, knowing your craft, doing the work are the first 2 things. The third thing, if I'm going to stick to 3 today, is knowing your heart story, writing about something that really matters to you. What do I mean when I say heart story? It's the current of emotion that runs underneath and through every sentence, every image, every moment of your true story. So if your true story is about fear, there's a sense of fear in the images, in the metaphors, in the way people talk. If your story is about hope, if your story is about love, if your story is about bittersweet love, you know, whatever your story ends up being about, the emotion, it's there, it's running underneath. This is a big task. You know, if you're trying to do it, be sure to write at least 16 drafts. But it's running underneath every sentence, every image, every moment. It's why the story exists. It's the spiritual and emotional part of writing. I don't know if you know the work of Andre Debus, but he says, I think the deeper you go into questions, the deeper. I can't even see the quote because Zoom is covering it up. Okay, I'm going back. Hang on, everybody. Andre Debus. I think the deeper you go into questions, the deeper or more interesting the questions get. And I think that's the job of art. And when I talk about heart story, implanted in that is the idea that we're making art. I mean, especially with nonfiction, we have to be reminded. Nonfiction could just give information. A textbook, as boring as that is nonfiction. Technical manuals or nonfiction. Journalism, some journalism can be written with a lot of story in it, but some journalism is just giving you facts and figures. That's nonfiction. We're writing creative nonfiction, memoir, literary nonfiction prose. We're writing, it's an art form. And where it becomes an art form is the heart that you bring to it, the questions you're asking about the experience, the why are you writing about this thing today? Cheryl Strayed has a quote, I think it goes to the same place. Behind every good essay, there's an author with a savage desire to know more about what is already known. The world is out there. There's things we know. There's things we think we know. There's things we've been told all our life are true. Some of us more than others start to wonder and question those things all of our lives or at some point in our lives. That desire to know more about the things we think we know, or the desire to know more about the things we don't know, or the best material is the stuff we just can't figure out, that stuff we're lying awake at night. Why did I do that? Why did she say that? What did that mean? Why did I treat so-and-so badly when I love them so much? Why do I let so-and-so treat me so badly when I don't even like them that much? You know, these things that keep me awake, and whatever the things are that keep you awake, that's the heart story. That's what you should be writing about. So I'm going to, how do I stop sharing my screen? Oh, here we are. I am now stopped sharing my screen for a minute. We should be able to see one another. Somebody wave if that has been successful and you can see all the little Hollywood squares. Great. I believe Matt said that we're going to start with just people unmute themselves if they have a comment or a question, if any of that resonated with them, and if it becomes chaos, we'll come up with a more orderly system. But for the moment, if anybody out there has a thought about the things I said to you rather quickly or a question, I'd love to hear it.
Good morning. My name is Ashton, and there was a part that definitely did resonate. I had a nonfiction class that I took with Mr. Jones last semester that I was really nervous about because for all the writing I've ever wanted to do, nonfiction was somewhere I didn't want to go. There was like things about my own life I didn't want to bring up or address or explore. However, after that class, I have since opened up to it and realized that my writing is completely forever changed from everything prior because everything is enriched by the things that I actually feel or the things I actually remember. Thanks.
That's a good class. I'm glad you took it. Sarah?
Yes, the heart story. Do you think that sometime is a process of discovery when you start writing? Maybe you start at one point, but then as you write, you figure out the heart story is something really different.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the problems with being a writing teacher, and I'm glad I'm a writing teacher. And Ashton just told us about a wonderful writing teacher she had, or at least a good class. And I think Matt's a really good writing teacher, and I'm pretty sure Stephen isn't. Steve Coughlin. These are jokes. Steve and I like to treat. Okay, dumb jokes on Zoom never work. But I'm going to make fun of Steve Coughlin because that's what I do. Back to the question. When you're a writing teacher and you say it works like this, you get this, and then you do this, and it's important to do this. It makes it sound orderly, or it makes it sound like, since I've been at this for so many years and sort of know what I'm doing, I sit down and do it. My first drafts are lousy. I never show them to anybody. My second drafts are just barely breathing. And, all of that sort of trial and error and pulling out my hair. And I don't even think I can do this, that beginning writers go through. I still go through, but specific to the question, I start a piece of writing thinking I know what it's about or what the heart story is. I'm writing about this because I know there's something interesting in this moment from my childhood because I keep thinking about it. But draft number 3 or draft number 4, it's like, yeah, it's still interesting, but actually I've aimed the camera over here and the camera should be aimed over there. Or it's still interesting, but I thought the question was, why did my mother do the things she did? But the question's actually, why did my sisters and I not speak up? I'm making, so it's always an iterative process of trial and error. I wouldn't say you're always searching for your heart story. I think a couple of drafts in, a couple of maybe false starts, or if not false starts, just minor adjustments, it starts to lock into place. And then this becomes really important in revision because you can then say, okay, this material belongs. This material doesn't belong anymore because it's about something else. Even though I spent some time working on it, I'm going to set it aside. I give long answers. I hope Sarah understands that, yeah, you don't always know these things right away.
Oh, that's me. Hi, I'm with question.
Sorry. I muted her, sorry.
Oh, you muted yourself?
Hold on.
Okay.
I don't think I'm muted anymore.
Well, there are 2 people on the same screen over there? If Sarah's trying to talk, or if the person in front of Sarah's camera is trying to talk, you're still there. Now you're unmuted.
Okay. The question that I had is, you said you may be talking about a bigger issue or a bigger hard issue, but you're starting with just a small incident that is staying with you. Is that what you're saying when you start a flash fiction piece?
I'm thinking. there's no one way. Often the truth of a thing is found in the smaller moments, which is sort of why I began talking about, that it doesn't have to be a bar fight or a car chase or the biggest argument you've ever had with your ex-spouse. But some stories start hotter with a little more action. Some stories begin immediately with some sort of grabbing, urgent statement that the reader is like, whoa. And some stories do begin in a quieter way. But if the emotion is underneath it, even if it's beginning quietly, if the emotion is being gently revealed in the choice of words, the choice of images, the dialogue that you decide to include, then you've still got that heart story, that thing that's important to you, already unfolding on the page.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. If you have, if you've printed out or you have on your computer somewhere, I don't know how you'll have to work this out depending on your technology. The two very short stories I sent you, one by Lee Martin called Good Faith, and one by Catherine Neurenberger titled Little Lesson on How to Be. If you've got copies of those and you've written things on them or made notes or just want to look at them to refresh your memory, we're going to move to that part of it. But I am going to do that amazing thing again where I share my screen. I'm always amazed that it actually works. And move on to the first of those essays, Good Faith by Lee Martin. It's a little too small to read, but that's an advertisement for my magazine. This is how this essay appeared in my magazine back in fall of 2017. The magazine is called Brevity. And I'll just start with the first paragraph of the piece, because there's a lot packed in. It's only about, I put a word count down. It's only about 730 words, this essay by Lee Martin. But boy, he packs a lot in. His great-grandmother, his grandmother, his first marriage, his current marriage, his childhood, and all the birds. And it's, if nothing else, it's a piece to be studied for how does he fit all of that in. But I'm also excited about something else in this piece. And I'm not saying it's the best piece ever written, and I'm not saying you have to like it. I do think it's stitched together really well, and you can learn from it. And by the way, you can learn from writing you don't actually like, or that doesn't resonate with you. You can either decide what doesn't work for you, and you can learn a lot that way, or just say, well, it doesn't really resonate with me, but the way he put it together is actually kind of interesting. But this one actually resonates with me. A house wren is making a nest in the wreath on our front door. That's a pretty quiet beginning too. I'm sorry, I already forget who asked that question about quiet beginnings and heart stories. A house wren is making a nest in the wreath on our front door. If that's all I knew, I might say that's kind of a throwaway sentence. Why are you beginning with that? But of course, birds are throughout in this piece throughout. And also the idea of nesting comes up in every paragraph, and often more than once in every paragraph. And I mean human nesting, not just bird nesting. When my wife and I want to go out on the porch, we make sure to knock on the inside of the door. Just a little knock to warn her. I just love that little knock to warn her. You already start to get a sense of who this writer is. The idea of warning her. Logically, I can figure out what's going on, but there's a sense of there might be some danger here. And then we learn that these people are newlyweds at the age of 61 and 59, and that they lived unhappily with other people in separate houses. So that's 3 sentences in, or 2. Those are 2 long sentences in. I'm sorry, 3. And we've got so much information. Who the writer and his wife are, They're careful people who are concerned about the wren on their porch so much that they knock a little before they come out their front door. So there's a characterization going on, and also a situation, the bird's going to be okay. We've got these people getting married late in life after years of living unhappily with other people in separate houses, separate nests. Just so much going on there. Perhaps we don't deserve our happiness. We hurt others along the way to get here. I'm thinking about what Cheryl Strayed said and what Andre DeBoost said about those questions that are hard to answer. You know, our marriages went bad. We hurt people. The narrator of this left his wife to marry another woman, and now they're very unhappy. But do they deserve that? He just goes right at it. He doesn't tiptoe around. I give thanks. We've come here to spend what time we have left together. Just packed with things for us to think about and wonder about. Getting married when you may only live another 10 years, and we may, you know, life is unpredictable, but you know, if he's 61, and he's admitting that they had bad marriages, they lived unhappily, they hurt people, now they're happy, but it might not last that long. And then there's this wren out there building a nest. Very next sentence, he's talking about his childhood. Just a complete jump. But of course, it doesn't feel disconnected because of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th word is sparrows coming down the chimney. It's the birds again. And the fear. There they were, amazed and frightened by being where they'd never intended to be. That sentence, and I'm almost done. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but that sentence, there they were, amazed and frightened by being where they'd never intended to be, could very well describe the 61 and 59-year-old newlyweds in the first paragraph. But of course, he's talking about the sparrows. And then a bunch of questions about fear, what he was afraid of, the unpredictable nature of life. He says those flights. So the metaphor of the birds trying to nest, it's dangerous to make a nest on somebody's front porch. Those sparrows who were frightened about where they were. The birds are these two people. And I don't know when he figured that out. And I don't know when I figured that out. I had to read this piece a couple of times, but it's all there in those first two paragraphs, just packed in. Any thoughts on what you found interesting about that piece of writing by, and you know, a lot more goes on. You find out that you learn about his grandmother and his great-grandmother. You find out that they were high school sweethearts, the newlywed couple in their late 50s, early 60s. I mean, there's a whole lot more that goes on there. But I'd like to talk a little bit less now and hear from you guys. Any thoughts on that piece? Sarah's got her hand up, I think. And so if she unmutes, I'd love to hear from her.
Hi, so I love this piece. You know, it was essentially a love letter to me, you know, to his wife with that last line, I made a place in my heart for you, dear Kath, and finally we found our way home. So I'm struck by how much he got into this. I mean, the birds, yes, and the love story, but then also weaving, you know, the weaving of your lives together, the wreath in the beginning, the grandmother who had the loom, and yeah, I was amazed at how much he had into it and how it flowed together so well. But what I loved most about it was that it was a love letter to his new wife.
I agree that it's a love letter. I mean, God, if anybody ever wrote something about that, like that about me, I would indeed feel that. I don't know, I'm babbling here. I agree it's a love letter, okay? But imagine if it was a piece that was just, I love my wife, we're happy. She's wonderful, we're happy. She makes a nice, you know, arrangement on the porch, we're happy. It took all these years together, we're happy. Me, I'm speaking for myself, you don't have to agree. I'd be bored really quickly. It's like, I read pieces like that and I'm like, I'm really glad you're happy, but I don't really need to hear you talk about it that much. It either it either makes me feel bad that I'm not as happy as I want to be, or my marriage is not working, or it's just that, well, you're happy. There's not a whole lot of suspense in that.
There's a lot of the bad to the imagination, you know, the people we hurt, and, you know, and that whole sense of him, the fear, you know, and as we as people are birds flying scared, you know, so like you were saying, like the birds are the people. But I like it that you know that there was not happiness and badness in his life, but he doesn't go directly into the scene with that. It's either through the metaphor of the birds or that one sentence where he says, we hurt each other along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Other folks have, Meg.
I want to say something.
I like the themes that Lee put together in this. This notion of we are always seeking home, whether we're 60 or 16. But to find home, we have to make space for that. And I also like the metaphor of the weaving, that while grandmother was always seeking that place that felt like home to her, and we don't know why, and I don't think it matters that she went to here to there to there. Maybe she was just trying to get west where, you know, this is God's country. But I think this notion that we are, one of our purposes, or one of the most satisfying purposes we find, is seeking that home, whether it's internal in knowing ourselves, but also finding the power in that when we allow others to come in, whether we're weaving with words or twigs or thread, and taking risks.
Thank you, Meg. I was about to say the weaving, you know, that's how a nest is made, but you got there before I was able to wow people with that bit of information. But it's another way that the heart story is woven. Well, I'm talking about weaving and woven, but writing is a way of weaving. It's just pulled through. But I always like at this point to challenge. I mean, I love the piece, and I talked about why I love it, and the comments so far about the themes and how much, you know, love and is in the piece. But getting back down to looking at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs, how did he do it? I mean, is he magic? Did Lee Martin fall off, you know, a planet of wonderful writers, or how did he actually manage to get this much story into his piece? You don't have to answer all of this. I'm giving you a couple of questions just to challenge you to think. How did he manage to get this much information in a short piece? How did he manage to weave in and out, we're going to use that word a lot, I think, of the birds and his marriage and his childhood and even his ancestors that he didn't even quite know, and back to his marriage and the birds? How did he manage to do that? And if you were indeed taken by the writing at the sentence level or the paragraph level, how did he manage to make that work as well? Any thoughts on Abigail? Any thoughts on any of that?
So I think one of the ways that he manages to flow through here is his use of time, because I mean, we start in the present day, and then using sort of the birds as a carrier, we move to him being a boy, his great-grandmother, his childhood, which moves into how he and his wife first met. And then we sort of just float back up to the top, and we can kind of get that sense of loss, because through, you know, the birds, we've gotten from the present all the way back to the beginning and then back to the present again. So we don't need to be told, you know, we loved each other. We've experienced that, sort of.
Mm-hmm. Good. And I mean, there's a name for the classic bookend. It begins as he's 61 and she's 59 in the newlyweds. It weaves all over time and then ends in that same place. That's usually a good strategy. There's no one way to do these things. And writers break the rules all the time, but there's a strategy that almost always works if you want to take the reader to different points of time and not leave them lost or disoriented, is, you know, have the same bookends on each end. And by the way, there's a person named Jessica, Luann, Carla, Lillian, Alila, I can't see you, so you can't wave at me, but if you wanted to speak up, but for some reason you can't go to video mode, feel free to put something in the chat section, and I'll call on you. But whether you're one of those people or you're one of the people who is indeed shown on the video, anybody else have thoughts on Lee Martin's piece? What he did.
Casey has her hand up.
Casey, there's Casey. Casey, you have to unmute. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Hi. So I thought what was really interesting about this piece, and it serves to contrast the other one, was his structure. And I thought that, you know, like in the same paragraph, he brought in like dialogue and the story about his mother, and then went back to the birds, and that really served to do some weaving too. And I guess I tend to have more story beats than that, and it kind of, you know, it makes me cringe a little bit when somebody has a paragraph that long, but it really worked for him, and you know, served to, like I said, weave things together, because he really went from one subject to another in the same paragraph. So that was interesting.
I agree. And by the way, I spent extra time talking about scene, and this is a good example of not show, not tell, but show and tell. He opens with a scene. He doesn't open talking about the marriage. They're walking out the door, and there's a bird out there, and they're very careful to knock. That's why they become real people to us. Summers when I was a boy. He doesn't summarize his childhood, though in a sense he does, but he does it within the scene of these frantic sparrows coming down the chimney. His great-great-grandmother, he gives us a lot of information about her, but then he imagines a scene. He wants to make her a real character too. So I imagine the yellow leaves, her sitting at the loom. My wife and I first loved each other when I was 18. That's more information, not a scene. But of course, then he goes back to, now I'm in the second to last paragraph. We're getting ready to leave for a weekend trip in Kathy, and there's the scene of I believe it's a duck that's flown into the cat mint. So he does a lot of telling, but he anchors each important moment in a scene, or in the case of the present, the newlywed story, the two scenes, the wren at the beginning and the mallard and the cat mint at the end. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to look at Kate. I call her Kate Nurenberger's, though I guess she writes under Catherine. Kate Nurenberger's piece, and it's very different, by the way. How clever of me to choose a different one. There we go. This is how it looked in the magazine. Here are the first, because she uses very, very short paragraphs, as you may have noted. She uses a lot. Did she use a lot more dialogue, or did Lee Martin even use dialogue? Oh, Kathy says, "Holy shit," at one point in Lee Martin's piece. That may be the only dialogue. That's in the end of the second to last paragraph. But moving on to Catherine Nurenberger's piece. It's an enormous amount of dialogue and extremely short paragraphs. And I will be honest with you, the first time I read it, because I'm the editor of the magazine that published it eventually, I was like, there's something weird going on here, but I'm having trouble even sure what it is. And the second time I read it, it's like, no, this is really, really interesting, the way she stitches this together. The woman at the Salvation Army who sorts and prices, it's in her 80s, and she underestimates the value of everything, for which I am grateful. Again, we're getting an instant sense of a writer, and a writer who's kind of ironically saying she loves the fact that this lady in her 80s basically puts the wrong price on everything. It's a little comic, it's a little bit of a wink at the reader, but I also get a sense already of a writer. There's a little girl, maybe 7, fiddling with her tea set. Her mother inspects drapes for stains. It's pretty risky. We're about 40 words in and we've already got 4 characters to keep track of. And that takes some work. And then out of nowhere, sometimes the very old and lonely are looking for an opening. What an interesting sentence. And then we realize what that sentence is talking about. The woman in her 80s glances up from her pricing and says something about the tea set and a baby doll long ago. And now we're back into this nostalgic. I'm careful not to make eye contact. Again, that odd narrator who, likes things priced low and, as we learn quickly enough, listens in on conversations. But in response to the story about the baby doll, the mother of the little girl says, "What a wonderful mother you had." Yes, she was. And then a question again. Why do children sometimes notice us and sometimes not? From the bin of dolls, what happened to your mother? She died. Suddenly that woman in her 80s behind the cash register who sorts and prices is crying. It's been 80 years and I still miss her. And now the narrator, who all we really know are these rather inconsequential things. She likes when things are underpriced. She shops at the Salvation Army, but even then she likes when things are priced a little bit lower than they need to be. She listens in. She's a bit of an eavesdropper. She asks curious questions. All of a sudden, boom, a deep dive into her consciousness. When my daughter was born, I couldn't stop thinking about how we were going to die. I won't read the rest of that to you, but I'll remind you of the quote from Andre Dubus about, diving into the questions, and the quote from Cheryl Strait about the passion to know more about the things that we think we know, or we don't know, or we don't know enough about. It's like death. And if you are a parent, you probably had that moment where you realized you could die too early and you're leaving that child alone. The child could die. How would you deal with that? And the author here, Catherine Nurenberger, just complicates it so much. If we were drowning, would it be better to hold her to me even if she fought away? Or should I let her out to float off to wonder why her mother didn't help her? These are deep, upsetting questions, and she inserts them in this odd little short scene at a Salvation Army where this woman, 80-year-old woman, starts crying about her dead mother. And this little child is, asking, well, where did your mother go? That's my take on, again, just the beginning. There's more there. There are themes, or what I would call the heart story, that flow through the whole piece. But admittedly, it's an odd piece. It's not a piece that I think is easy to grasp in the first reading. Okay, I'm done talking. What I'd really like to do is hear from anybody. You don't have to be the world's greatest literary critic. Just, I had a thought about this, or I noticed the writer did that and that was interesting, or I noticed the writer did that and it kind of confused me. Any kind of comments are welcome, but I think Ashton, who's got a great last name, by the way, I think Ashton is going to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Dinty.
Excellent. So what I found most profound is the scene work and how it's formatted, I suppose. In a sense, each paragraph, each short paragraph, kind of reminds me of like a pivoting camera or narrator in that sense. And it almost sounds like stage narration from time to time. I took a film class also that talked about how people can connect images with meaning inherently by them preceding each other. And I think that's kind of the successful structure of this oddly spaced piece.
Yeah, the film scene, or the scene, or the I forget what you said, Ashton, the term you used, but it it's like screenwriting, from the bin of dolls is almost like a stage direction. Other thoughts? Abigail.
I noticed the lack of dialogue tags, and I think that sort of went to illustrate the idea of this person is eavesdropping, because I mean, they're not like official, she said this, the lady said that. It's just sort of unofficial. I'm listening into the dialogue that maybe I'm not supposed to be listening in, because it doesn't have the dialogue tag. It's not official.
I love when I learn things from students. It's bothered me that there weren't more dialogue tags here. And as an editor, I thought, should I ask the writer to add them? But there was something so spare about it. And in the end, I said no. But I wasn't sure why there weren't dialogue tags. So where's Matt? They're paying me $30 to do this. Matt, give $10 to Abigail, because she just said the smartest thing yet. Not really. Really, she said the smartest thing yet, but don't give her my money. Yeah, I didn't know till this moment why the dialogue tags, or the missing dialogue tags, which can be annoying. You have to go back every once in a while and say, wait, who said that? I didn't know why they were important, and you just told me. Thank you, Abigail. Now, Abigail's raised the bar so high. Who else is? Brenda's brave enough to talk.
I'll do it.
Do it.
Can you hear me?
You're
Okay.
breaking up. You're breaking up a little, Brenda. So probably talk a little more slowly than you would if you were not on Zoom.
Okay. I was going to say that I think the conversation is more inviting, although it's eerie for us if we don't have the dialogue tags, because then we're all thinking about moms. If you're a mom, if you have a mom, right? And you had asked us to please investigate what made the piece alive. So I paid attention to ING words: pricing, fiddling, crying, holding, nursing, thinking, drowning, watching.
Cool. Yeah. Right. Those are interesting actions in and of themselves, but there's also the sort of thematic unity in there. Some of you haven't heard anything from yet. Just raise your hand and say, I hated this story. Mary.
There's so much in here that I'm still like wrestling with this piece. And I realized that the dialogue tags are a part of it, that there are these mothers and these daughters and okay, whose is whose and this, that, and the other thing. I really appreciate how vulnerable this writer is from the get-go in the, owning up to, I'm so glad she's mispricing these and that kind of thing. But in terms of what that last scene with those two sisters, where they, at dusk, only a few of us were left, nursing beers, our feet kicked up on the bottom rungs of various walkers. Wonderful. I imagine things like this down the road for myself. And I think that was really powerful. Anyway, I am still wrestling with it. That paragraph where my daughter was born, I couldn't stop thinking about how we were going to die. Holy cow. I still want to know more there, but I know, that's for me to sort of sit with. So that's all I've got.
I'm going to throw out as an idea that it's not always bad to be wrestling with a piece, even after you've read it a few times, even if you're like, there's a lot interesting going on there, but I don't really know if I'm catching it all even. And especially a piece about death, because I'm still wrestling with death. Personally, I'm going to be 65. I hope that doesn't mean I'm going to die next month, but I'll be 65 next month. You get older. When I was young, I thought one thing about death. I remember when I was 9, my cousin who was 17 died. That was like amazing in a weird way. I had no idea what that meant. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, but at different points in my life, death has meant different things to me. And of course, for a lot of my life, it wasn't ever going to happen. I didn't care. And then I had a daughter My wife and I had a daughter, and I thought differently about death, and I'm thinking differently about it now. Death is something I think we wrestle with constantly. So if you're going to write a piece about death, if it wraps up too neatly, or it fits together too sweetly, or it has an answer to death at the end, I'm going to start doubting it, because I don't know that we can ever resolve that issue. Maybe hopefully after death we can, but of course that depends on, you know, what A, it depends on what you believe spiritually, and then B, depends on whether what you believe is true, what we find out on the other side. I'm getting a little heavy here. Somebody stop me. Any other thoughts, any technical thoughts? She did very, very short sentences and paragraphs, mostly dialogue, missing dialogue tags. There's 4 mothers, 4 daughters, you know, interwoven throughout the piece. Some of them alive, some of them dead. Any other thoughts about what she did technically to try to fit this 462 word story into her frame?
Dinty, this is Matt.
Matt.
I'll jump in. I have to say, on the second piece, I didn't think that, I don't know if it's flashback or we were brought out of the moment in the Salvation Army with the scene that sort of ends it. And I guess maybe because I didn't know as much about the protagonist, I was a little bit lost with that scene, why we jumped there. I thought the scene of the bird coming through the fireplace as a flashback memory in the first piece worked a little bit better, but I was a little bit caught off guard on that.
Ashton?
Dr. Evertson's very good at setting up questions, but what I noticed particularly also with that part of the scene is that the flashback that we get thrown into that's related to the narrator, it's all built up by the woman who's mispricing things. There's these little comments about how, you know, sometimes older people are looking for an opening, and it's like, an opening for what? It begs the question. And it's some sort of sadness, inherent loss or something. And when we get to the flashback with Estelle, we find maybe a sense of what it was, just being happy or content or having what you need with a memory, if nothing else.
Thank you.
So is the little lesson how to live till 90, or a little lesson on how to be, to just intone the name?
Yeah, that title itself would take, there's a lot to unpack in that title, and I'm going to give you that honest teacher moment. I'm not sure what that title means. I know it makes me think, so I like that. I mean, to me, it's always a balance. There are pieces that are so opaque, so mysterious, that you think about them and you go, I'm never going to make any sense out of this. And for me as an editor or a reader, I just walk away. It's like, come on, I need more help. There's pieces that explain things so clearly. I'm like, come on, this isn't grade school. Don't talk down to me. I don't like a moral at the end of the story. Then there's pieces that give me a lot to think about. Certainly this piece gives me a lot to think about, and some of it actually, I'm not even sure I understand at this point. Carla, did you have your hand up?
I did. So if you've been around people that have memory loss issues, the last part kind of makes sense. And yeah, I'm going to get emotional here. So bear with me. Just that idea of that lesson of how to be kind when people don't remember. You know, those little, it's kind of those little lessons all the way through. As I was reading it, it was the mother's kind of letting the little girl talk to the 80-year-old.
And that mother, the first words out of the mother's mouth, I think, are, what a wonderful mother you had, which she's saying to the 80-year-old. So that's the first act of kindness.
Right.
There's multiple acts of kindness.
Oh, throughout the whole thing. And and it's almost that idea of how are you learning from early age through death to be kind to one another, and how do we treat one another?
Wow. See, I'm gonna leave now and let you guys teach this class. That's brilliant. If I'm correct, it's about 10:31 in Mountain Land. Is that right?
Yeah. Do we have time to have Joanne's question?
Oh, sure. Joanne, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm looking all over the screen. There she is. Hi, Joanne.
Hi. I was just going to follow up on that lessons learned. And to me, there was kindness, but the whole thing was about listening, and truly listening all the way through. So that was the lesson that I got from this.
Beautiful. So I think it's about 10:32 in the mountains. I'm going to propose hold up your hand, hold up 5 fingers if you think 5 minutes is enough. Hold on up 7 fingers if you want a little bit longer. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, which will bring you back at 10:37. Pet your dog, visit some room in your house that you want to visit, get a snack. Before you leave though, I'm sorry, when you come back, you could write. I'm gonna have you do some writing later. I guess you could do that on your laptop. I don't know if you can do that and be on Zoom at the same time. I'd recommend that you grab a piece of paper and a pencil or pen and take notes, because the prompts are going to be about taking notes, not writing scenes. So when you come back, I would recommend you have a piece of paper and a pen, a couple of pieces of paper nearby and handy. And it's now 10:33, so 5 minutes would be 10:38. And I'll see you very soon. Whoa. Oh, microphone's still on. Welcome back, people. Give it another minute or two. I ate 3 pieces of watermelon, said hello to my wife, and got the mail. That was my 5 minutes.
Any offers yet, Dinty, on the house?
So I'm sitting in an office on my first floor that actually has glass windows. It's like an old, doors with multi-pane glass windows. So I actually was teaching, and the real estate agent explained to the people who just decided last night they wanted to see the house. They explained to people that I'd be in there teaching a class on, so everybody was, but I could sort of see them wandering around, and I'm like trying to teach my class, and do they look interested? They actually looked scared. I don't know. It's an odd time. Speaking of pandemic, it's an odd time to try to be selling a house, certainly. So I have, so what happens for the next hour is we talk a bit more. And then eventually I'm going to move us on to the writing prompts. The writing prompts is going to be mainly you sitting there in front of, I'm going to ask you various questions and try to nudge you to think about various things. And then that'll take us all the way up to 11:30 your time, wherein, and Matt is going to double check me and put it in the chat because I'm still afraid I'm getting all the times wrong. That'll take us up to 11:30 your time, at which point you have a 2-hour break and you come back at 1:30 your time. Matt's going like this. Okay, good. So I think that's is that your dog, Sarah, or is that a background with a dog? That dog's not moving. I think it's a background with a dog. Okay. I'm just going to open up to general questions for a little while, if you'd like. It could be about flash writing, though we're going to, I'll talk more about that with the prompts. It could be about scenes and heart story. It could be about anything to do with writing prose. I publish stories, I publish books. I knock my head against my keyboard constantly trying to figure out how to become a better writer. We could talk about the deepest, most philosophical aspects of art, or we could talk about the more practical things like what pencil should you use to bang into your forehead when the writing's not going well. Anybody want to just talk as if we were sitting around a table at the workshop? Mary.
I have a really simple question, Dinty. I'm really curious about the 750 word length limit in brevity, and why 750, not 1,000, so on. If you could speak to that.
When I started the magazine in 1997, there was no such thing. I mean, sure there was. People have always written brief pieces, but nobody had identified a genre called flash essay or flash nonfiction. It was happening, but I mean, Ben Franklin did it. I think Montaigne did it, but it really wasn't a thing. So I took my cue from flash fiction, which actually was already a movement back in the 90s. And there were numerous books of flash fiction, wonderful ones. And I had one foot in fiction writing firmly back then. So I sort of took my cue from them. Some of them said 500 words, some of them said 1,000 words, some of them came in between there, and it's kind of arbitrary. There are a wonderful series of anthologies from Judith Kitchen full of brief essays, she called them, but they allowed up to 2,000 words, which I thought was, I thought that was more than a Flash should be. So I kind of picked 750 out of, I liked the 500, I liked the 1,000, and I picked it. And there's nothing magical about it. I could have picked 800. I could have picked 650. Jessica.
Yeah, thanks, Dinty. So for the past year or so, I've been writing a column for an alt weekly here in Anchorage. And my form is actually even shorter. I took a cue from Tom Skoka. I used to write a column for the All called New York City Weather Reviews. And my day job, I'm a forecaster. So I started writing a little column called the Hindcast. And it's, so it starts with a little bit about the weather. So maybe that's actually from Ben Franklin.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of goes into a little bit of a micro essay. And my form's typically just 1 to 3 paragraphs. So it maximum 300, 400 words. But I find myself really fixated now on syntax and the sentence level once you start working the microform. And I'm looking to make my sentences more powerful and get to the heart story or get to the meat of the action faster and in a more fulfilling way. So any advice you have about that?
First of all, the fact that you're thinking about it is, you've taken the first and most important step. And it's a real challenge. You know, the word limit either your editor has given you or you've given yourself, that's a real challenge. My advice is, good for you that you're actually thinking, how can I do that? And there's no, I mean, what I like to say about Flash, and I think it's 99% of the time true, is that, you know, with Flash nonfiction, there's no words wasted. There's no time to waste a single word or syllable. So most sentences do 3 things, you know, 3 different things. But a sentence is either telling you something about a character, and I use the term character in nonfiction because even though they're real people, you're writing about your mother, your brother, yourself, your spouse, your neighbor. Just like a fiction writer has to create a character on the page, living, breathing, moving, lifting a teacup, laughing a certain way. And in that way, the fiction writer gives us the illusion that that person is real. Nonfiction writers have to do the same thing. The person is real, your mother, your ex-lover, your child, your neighbor. That person is real, but we've never met that person, we the readers. So you have to build, you know, like use a painting metaphor, you have to build the layers of paint on the page the same way a fiction writer does if you're trying to write nonfiction about people. So anyway, a little bit of a digression there. In Flash, every sentence has to do 3 things, but they're not always the same 3 things. So a sentence might advance character a little bit, one of the characters or the writer herself who is a character. We have never met the writer, so we need to learn things about the writer. And it might move the plot forward, and it might give us some of the writer's voice. Or it might create suspense and also include a metaphor and move the plot forward. Or it might be a hinge sentence that gets us from one scene of the essay to another. And it also, you know, has some interesting intricacies of language that make our ear tingle, and we're reading for the sound of the words. If your sentence is only doing one thing, you are wasting precious words. So that's another way to attack it. Already for Jessica, I believe. How interesting to be a weather forecaster in Alaska, I imagine. So if look at your sentences and say, is it only doing one thing? Is it only telling us a fact? well, then where's your voice, or where's characterization, or where is it setting up some sort of tone or mood as well as giving us a fact? Maybe start with every sentence does 2 things and work your way up to 3, but that's the goal. Meg.
Dinty, could you talk a little bit about, are there characteristic differences between flash nonfiction and a short story that's prose, or is one just longer than the other?
I mean, the urgency is different. The compression, I mean, poets, some of you I assume are poets and have taken poetry classes. Poets talk all the time about compression. The compression is different. And I mean, another way to think about it, because we all start out as writers, we have a blank page. What are we going to put down on the page? What do we think of what we just put down on the page? Is it good enough? And then all of self-doubt and self-loathing moments. And then, well, damn it, it isn't very good, but I'm going to make it better. But eventually in writing, we should be thinking about the reader. And the experience, you know, the simple experience of sitting down and reading something and being done in 3 minutes is very different than the experience of sitting down and reading something and being done in 30 minutes. Or if it's a book, you know, 4 one-hour chunks of reading. So the difference is in the experience that the reader has. Sarah, or Sarah's dog, I can't tell. Sarah's husky.
I'll try to sit in front of him. It's a photo. I actually have 2 questions, and the first is, way back when you first started Dinty, you said there were the 12 things that you need to be a writer, and you gave us craft, hard story, and the short story. I mean, the hard story, hard work, and craft. And I was wondering what the other 9 are.
Oh, that was me being. Let me answer that quickly. That was me being silly.
Okay.
It's like every time, anybody who's ever taken a class with me, every time I come in, I say, well, there's 4 important things, and then like the next semester is like 5 important things, and then there's 3 important things. I was sort of making fun of myself.
Okay.
So today I was prepared. Today I was prepared to focus on 3.
Okay.
If you gave me, if you gave me an hour, I'd come up with 9.
Okay. Well, then my second question is kind of just the mechanics of submitting to brevity. Would you have a whole staff of people reading for you, and then they just pass on the ones that they think that you would be interested in, and then do you like sit on kind of like a round table and a lot of people discuss what you'll take? I just wondering about.
I mean, for the first 7 or 8 years, I read everything, and now it's gotten so large. Thank you. Sort of thank you. Some days I want to pull my hair out and pull the plug on the magazine. If you start a magazine and you give it away for free, you're never going to make any money from it. That was the mistake I made in 1997. But anyway, for the first many years, I'd read all of it myself, and then it got so many submissions, so many people sending work in, which was wonderful, that I started bringing in volunteers to help. So right now there's more than a dozen readers. Every piece gets read by 3 people for the first round. And if it gets 3 no's, if all 3 people say no, this is, you know, and usually it's just not that it's bad writing, it's like, this is a second draft and it needs more work. If it gets 3 no's, then it gets a nice note saying no thank you. If it gets a mixed reaction, another 1 or 2 readers look at it to try to break the tie. If it gets 3 yes votes, then the managing editor looks at it and then sends it up to me, and I make and it's all done virtually. We have readers in California, we have readers in Iowa, we have readers in Connecticut, we have readers in Dubai, we have readers in Israel. I mean, by readers, I mean the manuscript readers who help choose the work that goes into the magazine. So we don't actually sit around a table literally and talk about the work, but we do it virtually through Submittable and sometimes through email. But anyway, eventually it gets kicked up to the top and I have to make the hard decisions. Ashton.
So in regards to being an editor of a literary magazine journal, what would you recommend if not setting it up for free, what other recommendations do you have for someone trying to get into that?
Boy, that's a big topic.
Sorry.
No, I don't mean that bad. It's a topic I think about a lot. Because of the wonderful thing about the internet, and the technology gets better and better for this, is you can start a magazine without a lot of money. You know, in the old days, you'd need to cover the cost of the trees getting chopped down, not literally, but you had to buy paper and you had to cover the cost of the ink, and then mailing is really expensive. So to start a dead tree and toxic ink traditional paper journal, the barrier to entry was so great that there was very, very few of them. Now the barrier of entry to start a literary magazine online is very low, which is great because there's a lot of great writers out there and it creates more opportunities. But there's also a lot of magazines and it's hard to get noticed out there in the marketplace. So I usually tell people to think about, is there a niche? The most obvious ones are writing about nature or writing for children or ekphrastic writing about, other art forms. Regional, there are magazines that focus on the Rocky Mountain region. There's magazines that focus on New York City. So I'm not nothing, and then if anything, or just focus on poetry, or just focus on nonfiction, or have multiple foci. Nonfiction about the American West, written with a feminist perspective. I mean, sometimes you can layer these to get a tighter focus. But there's nothing wrong with starting saying, no, I've thought about all that, but you should think about it. And I'm going to have a magazine that's just about good writing. Just be conscious about that. You're going to get a lot more submissions if it's like, we'll take anything. And that could be exciting until suddenly you're too successful and you can't read all the submissions. So think it through at every stage, but it's also really exciting to do it. It's also a service to writers. And by the way, if there's a magazine near you, or now that we're all digital, it doesn't have to be near you, that you like, volunteer to join their submission reading team. You learn so much by looking at the writing of other people and having to make that hard choice. God, this seems like a nice person, but the writing just isn't working. And eventually you go, well, why? And then now you're learning something that comes into your own writing. Or, this is it's put together so well. This writer really seems to have such excellent craft, and I'm bored. Well, why? What's missing? And if you force yourself to figure that out, you learn so much. One or two more questions or comments before we move on, if you have them.
I think Ariana has a question there, or maybe Jenny. Got to unmute.
The squares are suddenly moving around on the screen. I think I probably shouldn't have dropped acid during the break. That's a joke.
Dinty, I have a question.
Okay.
In the second piece.
Oh, Virginia. Okay. You said Ginny. Virginia or Ginny?
My mom is Virginia. She's in the chair. You can almost see her over there. I'm Ariana. I'm her kid. We shared a screen because it made everyone's life easier.
Ginny, can you lean closer to your microphone? I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you.
Okay. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm actually Ariana. I'm Ginny's daughter. My mom, obviously, we're just sharing a screen because we live in the same house and it made life easy. I did have a question about the second piece that we read, kind of not specifically about it, but that one has, I felt like, scene moments that didn't contribute as much, I think. Towards the end, they're talking about why the narrator's mom died. And there's just this random anecdote that the narrator's holding a stack of wooden jigsaw puzzles, and then they're priced, which I think does a good job of anchoring us in the moment and reminding us where we are. But I'm curious about how you select those moments and like what's considered necessary and what's just a distraction from the bigger picture of what's going on in the scene.
Well, you answered part of that question already, Ariana, right?
Yes.
Which is the writer decided instinctively or deliberately, I need to touch base and put us back in that Salvation Army because it's drifting away. The second, and it's not a very satisfying answer to your question, is you know, part of it says instinct. What do I need to include? You're not going to find a book that gives you that's the beautiful thing about an art form, and the frustrating thing about an art form is, you know, if there were easy answers, it wouldn't be such a fascinating and maddening pursuit. What do you need to include? What details need to be in there? When do you need to weave back to remind? Some of it's just developing an instinct, and that instinct is going to become your style, which is going to be different than Carla's style, which is going to be different than Katie's style, which is going to be different than Brenda's style, or Lila, excuse me if I'm saying your name wrong, different than Lillian's style. There's not a cut and dried answer to that. I'm going to go into the prompt portion of our morning time together. I'm going to share screens in a minute, or share my screen, so you're looking at my PowerPoint. I'm going to talk over it. A couple of guidelines. One is, I think there's 4 or 5 questions I'm going to ask you. The first two, I'm going to have you spend a little bit of time jotting down notes wherever, on your laptop, on your piece of paper, on your legal pad. The only way to do it wrong is if you're like not jotting down notes. If you're just like, I don't know what to say, just write something down. It's going to be a fairly wide open subject area. If I ask you a question or push you in a particular direction with these 4 or 5 prompts, and your brain is saying, yeah, that's interesting, but this other thing that I'm thinking about is even more interesting, trust your brain or your heart or your gut, whatever's speaking to you. I'm never going to see these notes. The notes are private. So in terms of pleasing the teacher, or if you're raised to be a good Catholic boy or a good Catholic girl in terms of following directions, I'll never know. And sometimes following directions is good, even in writing. And sometimes following directions is bad, because your unconscious mind is going to take you someplace more interesting if you just let it kick in and lead you. So I'm going to give you some prompts that push you in a particular direction, and go with them. But if something more interesting starts to develop, don't go with them. For the next 20 minutes or so, all you're doing is taking notes. You're not writing beautiful sentences. You're not writing paragraphs. All that's going to happen during your lunch break, hopefully. So you're not writing you're not writing a short essay in the next 20 minutes. You're gathering a lot of notes, some of which might result in a short essay, some of which may be in that essay off on the edges, but they're never even actually stated. They just help you get in the emotional or psychological world of that essay. And some of them may be not useful in the end, but you won't know until you jot them down. Make sense? Now, the magic of screen share. Oh, that was the screen for the break time. I think the purpose of memoir is to enlighten. It is to bring light where there is darkness. Just throw that out there. The best essays come from the moment in which people really need to work something out. In an essay, you better speak from the heart, or the reader will catch the phoniness whistling through your hollow phrases. Nonfiction is in the facts. Creative nonfiction is in the telling. Just some, there wasn't time for discussion of that. Now we're at the prompts. Because of where we are right now, Matt and Steve and I thought it might be a good idea to focus on this weird pandemic world we're living in right now. The virus, the way people are responding to the virus, the limitations or freedoms that we feel we have or don't feel we have because of the virus. Anything, the human side of it, the community side of it, the parenting side of it, the taking care of aging parents side of it, the actual medical side of it, the weirdness about toilet paper and hand cleanser, whatever. All of that is sort of part of this pandemic experience. I went to that slide too fast. So I'm going to give you a couple of prompts, and I just want you to be just open to anything. So, you know, the first prompt is going to ask you to think about something having to do with the pandemic. I would urge you not to go to politics. You know, if the current president is your favorite president, if the current president is not your favorite president, that's not going to work. You're welcome to your opinions. It's not going to work in this prompt. You know, I want it more personal. You know, if you are feeling isolated at home, if you are going out, if you weren't going out and then you did go out, if you're worried about masks, if you're making masks, if you found a mask that you like, if cooking is getting, you know, there's the cooking aspect of it, but everybody in this group is having a different experience. There's common things. We're either wearing masks or we're getting messages about wearing masks. We're either staying home or we stayed home for a while and we're not staying home as much anymore. We're either, you know, for a while, none of us were going to restaurants because they were all closed. Some of us still aren't. There's the cooking, there's the washing of your hands, there's the worrying about having people over. There's the, I want to have people over, damn it, I'm not going to listen to the experts anymore. There's the looking out the window at people who aren't social distancing if you are. I'm just throwing this all out here. All of that is in the mix, okay? Conversations you've had with people you can't see because they're socially distanced in a nursing home or otherwise, or you are. All of that stuff is emotional. I think that's what I'm trying to get at here. The choices we make about going inside or outside are emotional. The choices we make about getting together with people are emotional. Food becomes very emotional, I've found, in this situation. Worrying about whether it's as bad as they say or not as bad as they say. You know, I'm focusing on the emotional, not the political. But as far as what I mean by the pandemic, it's essentially anything that's happened to you in the last 3 or so months. In other words, the what you write this afternoon and share with us after the lunch break might not even mention COVID, pandemic, masks, or you know, it might just be in there somewhere. So anyway, speech over. I want you to think of a memory. Usually the first thing or the second thing to pop into your mind is the best one, even if you don't know why. Just a very short, specific moment in time that you think somehow feels like your experience over the last couple of months. That moment in the grocery store, that moment in the house, that moment when so-and-so came over, that phone call, whatever. Okay? Fix that in your mind, and I'm going to set a timer for myself of 5 minutes. And all I want you to do is, it's up there on the screen, just start thinking, okay, where was I? What was I wearing? What, you know, if you were in a room alone, what was it? What else was in the room? What noises were coming from the windows? Where was your dog barking? What did you smell? Could you smell that morning's breakfast? Could you smell your dog? Were the windows open and you could smell Nebraska? Just you know, the senses are what you heard, what you tasted, what you smelled. Just write down notes about how you felt and what senses in that moment. I'm giving you too many directions. Pick a moment, take notes about how it felt and what you remember, focusing especially on the 5 senses. The timer has started, and I will tell you when it's time to stop jotting down your notes, and then I'll give you another prompt. So that's the signal to just start wrapping that up. You will have time. Let me stop that signal. You'll have time to work on it some more over break. But that particular, finish the thought that you're working on, please. Here's the second prompt, and you will have, once again, 5 minutes to take notes towards this one. Again, think scene, but you're not writing the scene yet. You're sort of gathering material that's going to help you build that scene when you do decide to write your flash essay over the lunch break. So I want you to choose another moment, and not directly related, meaning, you know, if the first scene was, this is really silly, but like, I want to buy a mask. And the second scene is I walked in the store and I bought a mask. That's a little bit too much of a cause and effect sort of thing. But it might be related emotionally. It might be related for reasons you can't even explain. It might be related because some of the same feelings came up, or you're in the same location. Don't even worry too much. Please don't worry too much about why you're choosing this second moment. But in some way it feels like, okay, this moment over the last, it could be over the last 3 months, or maybe it actually goes even further back. That's up to you. 5 minutes, take some notes. Be sure to catch sensory detail. Where were you? What did it look like? If you're sitting down, where's your hand? What does the chair feel like? If you're standing up and you've got your hand in your pocket, what's in your pocket? What are the smells wafting in the window? There's the noises in the house or in the store or in the car, but there's also the noises just on the other side of the window. I'll be quiet now. 5 minutes. A scene that somehow seems to be related. You may or may not even be sure why. Take notes towards it, and you'll be doing that much better if I were quiet, which I'm going to be right now. Finish up the thought or the sentence, or maybe some of you aren't even writing complete sentences, which is fine at this stage, but figure out how to get out of that little noise my phone is making. I'm going to give you a few more prompts that are going to be much briefer. Going to have like a minute or two to think about them. Everybody doing okay? Thank you. So thinking about that first moment in time, which may have been a week ago, it might have been 3 months ago. Just, you know, it could be, again, a small thing. It could be about you and how you felt about something. It could be you didn't foresee the future, which very few of us do. What do you know now? Emotionally, practically, factually, experientially, that you didn't know then. Just write down a few, just write down what that is and how you feel about it. What do you know now? Even if it was just yesterday. You know, we grow day to day. What do you know now that you didn't know then? Next one. Thinking of that moment sometime last week or last month or 3 months ago, or thinking about the other moment, which may be further back in time. I don't know. Everybody's got a different take on this. What will you never know? In terms of what you were thinking about, what you were worrying about, what you expected would happen, what the other people were thinking about, what will you never know? If you live another 400 years, you'll still never know the answer to this. Think about it a minute and then jot down a few sentences about that thing that you'll never know. And finish up that thought, wherever that goofy question took you, finish up whatever you're jotting down. So I asked those last two questions. What do you know now that you didn't know then, and what will you never know? Sometimes I ask people to think about what they thought they knew. Like you were 2 months ago, you were sure of it. And you look back now and you realize you were all wrong about it. I often think the heart story, or the real mystery of the story, is often found in those questions. Because you know the expression, write what you know. I think it's write what you don't know. I mean, obviously, if you're writing about horses, you need to learn a few things about horses. But emotionally, I think write what you know is backwards. It's like the stuff you'll never know and doesn't seem will ever make sense. You can create a lifetime writing about that. So I'm about to give you the prompt for when we meet at 1:30 your time. But just understand that there is no obligation that everything you've jotted down on the page over these last 20 minutes shows up. In fact, some of it won't. Some of it might be in there because you remember it. It informed you, but it may not show up at all. So, in 700 words or less, which is about 2 double-spaced typed pages. If you're writing it out by hand, you'll have to figure out your own. But I'd like you to keep to that length, because if somebody comes back with 2,000 words, that's going to mean other people don't get a chance to share. Plus, that's the challenge, is to write briefly. In 700 words or less, write an essay focusing on the main moment, the first one, but you can bring in the second one if you want or not. But focus on the details and try to write a scene, not just don't just explain to us what it was and how it felt. Try to take us there through the sensory details. And it's another quote from Pat Madden. I write essays to reckon with oddities and confounding grace, which it seems to me are ever present, if only we're attentive to them, which I believe is very true of Lee Martin's essay. I believe it's very true of Kate Nirenberger's odd little essay. I'm hoping it'll be true of yours. I'm going to stop sharing now, so I think we can all see each other. We have a few minutes. I hope my instructions were clear, but they seldom are. That's what my undergraduates tell me. Mr. Moore, you left the most important part out. So before we break for lunch, after lunch, we're going to meet again, and I am going to say, who wants to read what you've written? And it's going to be rough because you've only got 2 hours and you've got to eat and feed the dog, and some of you have other obligations. So it's going to be rough, but we're going to listen to it, and we're going to look for the part that's alive and praise that part and push you to think about where that piece might go.